Love, love, until I feel the breath of thy spirit flowing in me.
Hello, welcome to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Shirley Baskett. Last week she shared her story of same-sex attraction, how it led her away from the church and then back to the church. Welcome, Shirley.
Thank you.
Just to, for the audience, could you share briefly of your journey back into the church?
Okay. Well, I lived for 8.5 years from about the age of 20 through to 28, very much as a lesbian, as in a lesbian identity, completely and fully thinking that that was the only way I could ever live. But when I was about 28, I started realising that what I'd hoped for, to find a wonderful relationship, wasn't happening for me. And so I'd kind of given up on all human love, if you like, and I remembered that God might be there for me. So I prayed a last prayer, and God answered that in an amazing way and brought somebody to my home, actually, and who was able to really lead me back to Jesus. And so I decided that if God was going to answer that prayer, I was going to live my life for Him and obey Him no matter what it cost me. I was going to live that life for Him. I didn't think that I could change. I certainly never thought I would marry, but I did. But that, in some ways, some people think, oh, was that the aim? No, it wasn't. I think that God just brought this man into my life because he's been such a blessing to me.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And what did you friends and family think about that change to be married after living?
Well, for a lot of my gay friends, of course, it was a bit of a shock because I did live very much in that life. Some people said to me, oh, that's really good that that's happened for you because you were such a mess. But I thought they were a mess, not me. But nobody at that stage really sort of attacked me or anything like that. My parents didn't know my story. My sister did. She was delighted that I had come back to Jesus. My parents were happy I'd come back to Jesus, but they didn't know about my old life. But it was later on, people got very angry that I had changed, and I must admit I have had a much greater level of people attacking me since I've been post-gay, as I would call it, than I ever did when I was lesbian. But that's my experience, I guess.
And, what's your relationship with God now compared to the time before you came back to your faith, because you were involved in the church? Did you have a deeper understanding of God's love or forgiveness?
Absolutely, Geraldine. That's a very good question, actually, because when I was a younger person as a Christian, I thought that I really just had to obey God all the time, and I was always failing Him one way or another, usually morally. And so I had a thought that maybe if I really did really bad things, then I might get killed by God. He might have me in a car accident or hit me with lightning or something like that. So, of course, when I went away from God and He didn't do that, when I came back, I realised His grace had been on me all along. And so I think when I came back to God with a far greater understanding of His grace and His love. And in fact, one time I really felt that God spoke into my heart because I was starting to feel condemned again and saying, oh, look, I still sometimes have these feelings. I still sometimes have same-sex attraction, which is very common for people who come through like I have. And I thought, I must be really bad. I must be such a sinner. I must be the worst of sinners. And then I felt God say to me, do you think I loved you when you were actually in your sin? And I thought, well, He must have done because He brought me back to Himself. And so God does love us all the way through. He doesn't always condone what we do because He's not trying to be a bad, harsh God saying, you have to be a Christian and do this and walk away from being gay because I don't like it. That's not why God's motives are like that. His reasoning is because He wants the best for us. And He wants us to know Him, and sin separates us from God. And so when we do come and we ask Him to cleanse us And in the Word it says, or in the Bible it says that if we come to Him and ask for forgiveness, He will cleanse us, He will forgive us over and over and over. And when we do that, we can have a relationship with Him that's better than anything. Now, a lot of my friends haven't married. A lot of my friends that I call post-gay are not married. But they still want to honour God too, and they still want to live a life that's pleasing to God. Some of them have never had any change in their feelings like I have had. I see myself right out here at the end of the spectrum, having had a lot of transformation in my life. But that's actually quite unusual. For a lot of people, they're in the middle. God changes some parts, some don't. But most people I know who want to follow Christ, who've had same-sex attraction, they want Christ more than they want to live by their feelings, because he's better than anything else. You fall in love with Jesus, and so He becomes everything. That's true of me too, Geraldine. Even though I married Pete, I say to him often, you're lucky, because when I came back to Jesus, I knew no one human person can fulfill me. Only God can do that.
Yes.
And so, although I love Pete and I'm grateful for him, God is still my number one. And so, if Pete goes, God is still my number one. So, yeah.
Yes. And what do you think is the Christian response to, same-sex attraction towards people?
Yeah. Toward other people who are same-sex attracted.
Yes. How should the church respond to people with same-sex attraction?
Yeah, I think as God does, and show love, and to have compassion for people. People who are non-believers, we don't have any right to judge them. And so, we don't have any right to do anything other than love them. People who are Christians already often know what God thinks, so they go through a lot of trauma, and especially a young person who is feeling these feelings, often in their teens. I think of a lot of young people that I talk to today, and a lot of people who say around about the age of 14 to 16, I knew I was gay. That's how they put it. And so they get online, and so they read a lot of stuff, and then they feel kind of like that's the only way they can go. So they go through a lot of suffering, a lot of trauma. We need to love them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We've got to take a break now.
Okay.
You've been watching Spirit of Life. Stay with us, and we'll be back after the break. Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Shirley Baskett. She's been sharing about the Christian response to same-sex attraction, as she has had same-sex attraction. Welcome back, Shirley.
Thank you.
Yeah, you were talking about Christians need to love and and not look down on people with same-sex attraction.
Yeah, and certainly not to condemn, of course. I think within the church we have to learn to be a lot more transparent about our own failings and our own weaknesses, so that people can understand that all of us come to Christ with things that we need to put before Him. All of us come with things that we need to put right with God. And so if we demystify homosexuality, people, I hope, at 14 and 16 could come to people within the church, to their priests, to their pastors, to whoever, and say to them, I'm struggling with this, and actually get some support and hope without there being kind of an alarm of, oh, this is the most terrible thing, because it's not. And I think that's important within the church to do that. Also, there are many people, as I was saying before, who don't experience any change. It doesn't matter what they do. You can't pray away the gay. You can't just instantly, well, actually some people do say they have had that, but it's very, very, very rare. And so for a lot of people, they will experience these feelings through their lives, and as I say, a lot may not marry. So in the church, I think we need to learn to be much more intentional about being family. And especially for those who do go through their lives single, they need to be more honoured, I think, because they are allowing a cost on their lives where they're saying, I will deny myself, I will deny my feelings for the sake of Christ. they deserve a great deal of honour, I think, within the church.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I suppose within the church there are gay churches, and they sometimes have resented the fact that you have changed your feelings.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, I think, nowadays do turn toward gay theology, pro-gay theology. I've read pro-gay theology very intensively. I think it's very weak theology, frankly, but I understand why people want it to work. But I think, again, what we have to look at is, are we looking for having our satisfaction in this life, with relationships in this life? Or are we wanting to have a relationship with God that's vertical, that is God first? And I mean, the first commandment, love God with all your heart, and your mind, and your spirit, and your soul. Love God with everything you've got.
Yes.
If we do that first, I think that we come into line in a different way. But if we believe that the Christian life is all about satisfying me, I have my rights, I think we go a very different way.
Yes, I suppose people who suffer same-sex or who feel same-sex attracted, they would say they're denied marriage and children and family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often say to that, that we can't always outguess God. I would never thought I would marry, but I did. And so we often say, oh, but if I do this for God, my life's going to look like this. But what that's really saying is, God is not good. Okay, but if we say, I will come to God and trust that He is good and that what He will do for my life is good, whether I marry, whether I have children, or whether I don't, I think that's a better way, because we don't know how God's going to satisfy our lives. Maybe He'll have something for us that's completely different that we had not even imagined that will satisfy our lives. Maybe He will have a friendship that will be a satisfying friendship that is not sexual, and maybe we'll go on a mission field. Maybe we'll do something else.
Yes. And
I don't know.
You have got married, but you don't have children, and you know, what were your thoughts on marriage, children?
Yeah, well, see, this is a very big, important thing for me, because my great desire was to have children. I actually didn't really want a husband, but because I was a Christian, I had a husband. At last I thought, I can have a child. Even through my years in same-sex attraction, I was never comfortable with the idea of denying a child their father. Now, I know some of my friends did that, but I couldn't have. I always felt that a child had the right to have both biological parents. So it was a great joy to me when I married, because I now thought I can have a child. But it wasn't to be, because I married someone who couldn't give me children. So that's why in some ways I can really understand this ongoing life battle of wanting something very deeply and not being able to have it, and believing that that's going to satisfy me when only God can, because even a child is not necessarily going to satisfy your life. Of course, it's a natural desire. It's even a godly desire to want children. It's something God's given us instinctively to multiply.
Yes, with so much marriage problems and domestic violence and, children growing up with heterosexual couples, but still having a lot of abuse, What were your thoughts about all that?
It's a very broken world. And I think that's because right from the very beginning we know that we walked away from following God and living in His ways. So yes, there's a lot of brokenness, whether it's heterosexual or homosexual. And so some people say, well, look, it's somebody who's in a loving relationship that has children, that's just as good. Maybe the love is just as good. We can't say that it isn't, but it's still not having that intent that God had. The intent from Genesis 2, where God makes a man and a woman, and that's actually like a picture of the church and Christ coming together to create something that is life. And this is God's intent. And I think we can argue with God a lot about that, but it is God's intent, a man and a woman together. And I think that is the main beautiful way to go. But we have lots of ways of crushing that, whether we're homosexual or heterosexual, frankly.
Yes, it's something very controversial in today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I have friends that have brought up children together, some of them, And I found some of those children, as they get older, have resented the fact that they haven't had both biological parents. I know some people say that isn't always the case. But for me, my only option to have a child was to have a donor sperm. Now that's kind of a similar thing in a way, and I'm glad that I didn't go that way.
Yeah, we need to pause on that, but that's a fascinating story about your life. You've been watching Spirit of Life. Stay with us and we'll be back after the break. Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Shirley Baskett. She's been sharing her story of same-sex attraction, how she got married, and now how she wanted children.
Yeah, very much so. In fact, it became such a big obsession. It was actually probably worse than even my same-sex attraction had been.
Yes.
But our only options at the stage that we were married was to have donor sperm. And for me, biblically, I just couldn't really wear that. And so what it came down to was a fight within me of what my rights were, my rights to have a family. So I hear this sort of thing coming through a lot today. So to me, it was just something I couldn't do. And so it did cost me. And it has been a life of denial, if you like, and a great deal of grief. But at the same time, I still feel that I want to obey God in everything in my life, including whether I force the issue of having a child or not. So that's been my story.
So with you, the importance is following God, being open to His will.
Yeah, that's right.
And not saying, I suppose everyone...
I must have this because this will make me happy. A child will make me happy. Possibly that's true, but it also would have taken me, I think, out of God's will for my life.
Yes.
So we did try every other option. We have done quite a bit of fostering, so I understand what it is to have children in our life, but we never did have that joy of a child.
Yes. And has that led you into kind of, reaching out to people with same-sex attraction?
I think that that's been the upside, to be honest, because what it has done is it's given me a lot more time to love other people and to gather lots of other people into my life. I've done a lot of ministry sorts of things and worked with youth and had people come into my life in that way. But more than that, even though I didn't want this to happen, I've actually ended up spending a lot of time with ministries that help people who are of Christian faith, who have same-sex attraction.
Yes, I suppose there are churches and, there are many churches that have an emphasis on when you know Jesus, you can get all your needs met.
Yeah,
have we been falsely, influenced by that?
Not me necessarily, but I've certainly sat in churches that have told me that because you come to Jesus, everything's going to go perfect in your life. Yes. And that's really not the experience of many, many people. But that's also not the call of Jesus. Jesus called us to have a very costly discipleship sometimes. And that can be the same for same-sex attracted people. It can be the same for people like me who have wanted to obey Him despite this desire for a family. I can't steal someone else's baby.
You suddenly strike me as a joyful person.
Yeah, I think that God has given me joy. And I learned when I came back to Jesus that happiness and fun is one thing, but joy is very deep. And joy comes from God. And it says in the Word that joy is our strength. And I think joy is a gift that God gives us. And even in your worst pain, you can actually have a strange sense of God's joy that contains you. I can't explain that. Maybe it's mystical, but I know that to be true in my life.
Yes, I know there's a quote by Kahlil Gibran about if you can have the hand of grief, you can more experience joy, or
maybe
when you're
that's
suffering.
True. Yeah, I think it's certainly, there's an old poem and it's too long to say, but the last line of it is that God gave me a thorn, but the thorn was the very thing that took away the veil that showed His face, and that really has been true to me. That through that pain, it has given me a much deeper relationship with Jesus and with God. Yeah.
And what you've edited a book on same-sex attraction, people's
That's right.
stories. Could you
Yeah,
tell us more
that's-
about it?
Yeah, sure. It's actually a book called Sea Change, which was kind of a play on the idea of people wanting to go for a tree change or a sea change, but these people are wanting to have life that's different in Christ. So there's 16 stories from our region. My story's in there as well in a short version. And it's people who tell their journeys. So they're all very different. They tell them in their own voice. But I think what we're all trying to say in this book is that there's no real easy way through this. Most of us have been following Christ in our own different ways. So their stories are remarkable. There's several stories in there of, well, there's men and women. There are two stories of people who were transsexual. And there are several stories in there of women who are like me, some who have never actually acted on their feelings but have had strong feelings. There's one story of a parent and how they related to their child. So, yeah, people often say, you know, you come in as a Christian, you've got to go through all these really strange and weird processes. I don't know anybody who does any of these things we read about in newspapers. I've certainly never come across anybody who does shock treatment. I'm sure Christians have not done that. It's something that was done by the secular psychiatrists in the 50s and 60s, I think. But a lot of these things that are put forward, there is no gay cure type programs. A lot of the people I know are part of support groups. They may go and do Bible studies and have Bible discipleship where they talk transparently about their same-sex struggles. But that's kind of about as weird as it can get.
So it's not like we are forced into because of the genes, you know, with the same-sex attraction.
No, that's right. And the focus is not on changing people from homosexuality to heterosexuality. It is on changing them from a life that's been enslaved in sin to holiness and to being captive to Christ. So I'm hoping that the stories in this book will encourage people, even people who have children in their family or different family members who are gay, because people often wonder how to respond to them too. And so I hope that it helps people understand what really goes on in a person's life.
How would they get this book if they're interested?
They can get it on Amazon. That's probably the best place to find it.
Yeah. And you've been editing it for like the last 6 months or a year?
Yeah, it probably took around about a year to actually get the whole thing there and to talk about what we wanted to talk about in the book. There's somebody from Fiji in there, New Zealanders, Australians, so it's a lovely book.
Well, that's been fascinating. It's great to hear that it's been inspiration, your life and your struggles, and wish you all the best.
Thanks for having me here, Geraldine.
You've been watching Spirit of Life. Thanks for watching us. Goodbye and God bless you.